Boom. Spirit Warrior's deep roar echoed like thunder across the heavens and earth. Torrents of overwhelming spiritual energy surged from his body like a raging flood, distorting the very fabric of space. His eyes gleamed with sharp brilliance, his demeanor exuding confidence. The previous weakness was gone. Thanks to the so-called war sacrifice, he had instantly restored himself to peak condition. His depleted spiritual energy now surged through him once more. Standing atop the shoulder of his battle Emperor Dharmakaya, Spirit Warrior gazed down at Mu Chen with an imperious glare. At this final moment, he had turned the tables. Mu Chen, drained of spiritual energy, was no longer a threat in his eyes. Around White Jade Plaza, countless powerful figures shook their heads. No one had expected Spirit Warrior to have such a trump card. What was once a battle of mutual destruction had now completely reversed in his favor. This guy is ruthless. To seize that spot, he's willing to pay such a steep price, someone lamented. A small price to pay. Becoming the Continental heir means receiving the baptism and tempering of the entire Western Heaven continent's power. The chances of breaking through to Heavenly Supreme would soar. Compared to that, sacrificing an army of 1,000,000 is nothing. But still, this feels like an unfair victory. Mu Chen was already at a disadvantage, fighting in the Upper Earth Supreme battlefield with only the strength of a Lower Earth Supreme. And now Spirit Warrior resorts to such extreme methods. Some warriors couldn't help but voice their discontent. Mu Chen's astonishing display had earned him admiration, even among those who had once doubted him. The world is cruel. There's no such thing as absolute fairness. But reaching this point is already a remarkable feat for Mu Chen. With his talent and strength, he'll have more opportunities in the future. Soft murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many eyes were filled with regret. Mu Chen had truly come close to toppling Spirit Warrior, the Upper Earth Supreme Overlord of the Western Heaven continent. But in the end, he was just a step short. It seems your chances are gone. Amid the battlefield's devastation, Spirit Sword Sun sneered at Su Mu, watching his Spirit Warrior regain his strength. Su Mu's face darkened. No one had expected Spirit Warrior to unleash such a ruthless move, just as no one had expected Mu Chen to push him this far. Even if we don't get the spot, at least we've humbled you lot. Huh. The so-called strongest of the 4 great saint sons, the disciple of the Western Battle Emperor, was forced to such desperate measures by a Lower Earth Supreme. Let's see how you'll flaunt your arrogance in the future. Su Mu scoffed coldly. Spirit Sword Sun's gaze turned sharp, irritation flickering in his eyes. He knew Su Mu wasn't wrong. Even though Spirit Warrior had technically won, this battle had not brought him glory. Instead, Mu Chen's name was now bound to spread far and wide. After all, a Lower Earth Supreme had managed to push an Upper Earth Supreme to his limits. That alone was shocking. Victory is all that matters. No amount of outside chatter will change the outcome, Spirit Sword Sun replied icily. While they clashed with words, on the battlefield, Mu Chen stared at the rejuvenated Spirit Warrior, clicking his tongue in frustration. This guy was troublesome. Mu Chen had thrown everything he had at him, unleashing every trump card in his arsenal, yet he still hadn't gained the upper hand. Spirit Warrior truly lived up to his reputation as the strongest of the 4 great saint sons. No wonder he was trained by a heavenly supreme, Mu Chen murmured. Flattered, Spirit Warrior replied indifferently. But regardless, this is where you leave. He had finally come to recognize Mu Chen as a real threat, his earlier disdain now replaced with wary respect. Boom. Having suffered greatly at Mu Chen's hands, Spirit Warrior wasn't about to give him another chance. Without hesitation, he stomped down, unleashing a flood of spiritual energy as his figure blurred into countless afterimages, shooting toward Mu Chen like lightning. It was clear, he intended to end this battle for good. Light streaked through the air, and immense spiritual energy filled the heavens. In the blink of an eye, Spirit Warrior appeared before Mu Chen, who sat atop his immortal golden body. Mu Chen's spiritual energy was exhausted. The immortal golden body had dulled, unable to unleash further attacks. When Spirit Warrior arrived, nothing stopped him. Hand over the battle seal. The Spirit Warrior let out a cold shout, then suddenly slapped out with his palm. The wind from the strike roared like thunder, shattering the space as it shot directly towards Mu Chen's chest. Although Mu Chen appeared to have no means of resistance at this moment, the cautious Spirit Warrior still struck first, planning to severely injure Mu Chen before anything else. Whoosh! The force of the palm howled through the air, and countless pairs of eyes watched the scene with a sigh. This time, it seemed that Mu Chen would truly be defeated. The fierce palm wind charged forward, rapidly enlarging in Mu Chen's pupils. Yet, Instead of showing the slightest trace of panic on his face, Chen actually smiled faintly. Seeing that smile, the spirit warrior's eyes tightened, a sense of unease rising within him. But being a ruthless and decisive person, he quickly summoned his spiritual energy, causing the palm wind to grow even fiercer. No matter whether Chen was just pretending, with such close-range spiritual suppression, he believed Chen would have no way to counter it. Boom! The air trembled, and in the blink of an eye, the spirit warrior's fierce palm arrived in front of Chen. However, just as he was about to strike down, a long, slender hand suddenly reached out from thin air and collided forcefully with his palm. Boom! The immense spiritual energy erupted, sending the spirit warrior's body trembling. The palm wind was blocked, but before he could react, a foot wrapped in powerful spiritual energy appeared like a bolt of lightning and slammed fiercely into his chest. Bang! The shadow of the leg passed by, and the air exploded with a sharp burst. The caught-off-guard spirit warrior was sent flying helplessly, crashing into the ground and creating a huge crater. This sudden turn of events happened in the blink of an eye. As the spirit warrior's body was sent flying, countless gazes returned to their senses, their faces turning pale with shock. What just happened? How could Chen still possess such powerful spiritual energy? Countless gasps filled the air as disbelieving eyes turned towards Chen's position. And as their gazes landed there, the once noisy white jade plaza fell into complete silence. Everyone stood with their mouths agape, their faces filled with terror, looking as if they had seen a ghost. Because they saw that, next to Chen, who was seated with his immortal golden body, two figures had suddenly appeared. One was in black robes, the other in white robes, both radiating immense, overwhelming spiritual energy. Of course, what truly shocked them wasn't the spiritual energy emanating from these two figures, but rather the fact that these two suddenly appearing individuals looked exactly like Chen. What's going on here? How could those two look exactly like Chen? Are they his twin brothers? Nonsense. Those are spiritual avatars. Impossible. Chen is only at the lower Earth Supreme level. How could he create two spiritual avatars of the same level as himself? A wave of astonishment spread through the crowd. Countless people were left speechless, clearly stunned by this unexpected turn of events. They had thought the spirit warrior would end the battle, but who would have known that at the final moment, something bizarre had happened? Lu Xingchen, too, looked on in shock. He couldn't believe that the two figures identical to Chen were his twin brothers, so he leaned more towards the idea of them being spiritual avatars. But what confused him was why Chen's spiritual avatars were so powerful. Moreover, how could these spiritual avatars appear so real? They were nearly indistinguishable from the real Chen. Amid the loud, shocked murmurs, the Western Battle Emperor, who had been calm and composed, now showed a flicker of astonishment on his face. He stood up abruptly and stared blankly at the two figures that looked exactly like Chen within the light screen. Others might not understand what was happening, but as a heavenly supreme, how could he not recognize the truth? These weren't spiritual avatars at all, but completely real individuals. Furthermore, all three Chens had identical auras. Even their spiritual energy fluctuations were exactly the same. Yet they were filled with vitality, completely lacking the sluggishness that would come with spiritual avatars. If they were spiritual avatars, then such lively, almost corporeal avatars could only be created by someone at the heavenly supreme level. Yet Chen was only a lower earth supreme. Even if a heavenly supreme created a spiritual avatar, its strength would still be far inferior to the original body. Yet Chen's spiritual avatar was just as formidable as his true self. Even a heavenly supreme couldn't achieve this. At that moment, the Flame Emperor looked up, his gaze fixed on Chen's figure within the light screen. Clicking his tongue, he sighed inwardly. I didn't expect him to actually succeed in cultivating it. After tens of thousands of years, one Qi transforms three purities has finally reappeared in the world. He naturally knew that Chen had inherited the Heavenly Emperor's legacy and obtained one Qi transforms three purities. However, such a peerless divine ability was not something just anyone could cultivate successfully. Yet, clearly, Chen had done it. The Flame Emperor's eyes lingered on the three figures within the light screen before shifting to the Western Battle Emperor. He smiled faintly, and his laughter, though light, made the latter's face twitch involuntarily. It seems a miracle has indeed happened. Haha. On Mu Chen's behalf, I'll thank you for your generous gift, Battle Emperor. Boom. From the massive crater on the ground, Spirit Warrior's somewhat disheveled figure shot out. His gaze immediately locked onto Mu Chen's direction, filled with disbelief. He simply couldn't fathom how, in that desperate moment, Mu Chen had suddenly erupted with such a vast and boundless spiritual energy. His eyes swept across the sky before settling on the shoulder of the immortal golden body. The next instant, his pupils shrank violently. Because under the setting sun, there were 3 identical figures standing on the immortal golden body's shoulder. 3 Mu Chens. Spiritual avatars? Spirit Warrior gasped in disbelief but quickly dismissed the idea. He could sense the overwhelming spiritual energy fluctuations radiating from both the black-robed Mu Chen and the white-robed Mu Chen, each as powerful as the original Mu Chen himself. If they were mere spiritual avatars, this would be impossible. But if they weren't spiritual avatars, then what were they? For a moment, even Spirit Warrior felt utterly bewildered. While countless gazes across the battlefield remained locked in stunned silence, the white-robed Mu Chen on the immortal golden body's shoulder lowered his eyes towards Spirit Warrior and smiled faintly, trying to seize the battle seal. The black-robed Mu Chen continued with a smirk. Did you ever ask for our permission? You. Who are you? No outside assistance is allowed here. Spirit Warrior's face darkened. Unable to determine the identities of the black-robed and white-robed Mu Chen, he could only assume they were some kind of external reinforcements Mu Chen had secretly brought in, or perhaps long-lost twin brothers. In response, the black-robed and white-robed Mu Chen merely chuckled. Then, both placed a hand on Mu Chen's shoulders. In an instant, torrents of spiritual energy surged from their bodies, pouring ceaselessly into Mu Chen. As the spiritual energy flooded into him, Mu Chen's previously dim eyes regained their brilliance in a heartbeat. A powerful spiritual energy fluctuation radiated from his body, growing stronger by the second. Feeling the surging power within him, Mu Chen straightened up and cast a half-smiling gaze at the utterly shocked Spirit Warrior. It seems the one laughing in the end, isn't you? You. Spirit Warrior stared in disbelief. Mu Chen had recovered his strength so quickly. Most cultivators' spiritual energy contained their own will, making it nearly impossible for someone else's energy to be absorbed and assimilated so effortlessly. Yet, Mu Chen had taken in the energy from those two without any resistance, seamlessly merging it with his own. There was only one possible explanation. Mu Chen, the black-robed Mu Chen, and the white-robed Mu Chen were all one and the same. This wasn't some bizarre external reinforcement. This was Mu Chen's own doing. But how is that possible? Spirit Warrior still struggled to accept the truth. If Mu Chen possessed such a technique, didn't that mean he could split into 3 identical versions of himself, each as powerful as the original? That would mean that anyone fighting him wouldn't just be facing one Mu Chen, but 3. Just the thought of it made Spirit Warrior's head ache. A single Mu Chen was already troublesome enough. 3 of them would be an absolute nightmare. Suppressing the turmoil in his heart, Spirit Warrior took a deep breath and spoke coldly. I didn't expect you to have such a shocking trick up your sleeve, but it looks more intimidating than practical. Let's see if it's just for show. The 3 Mu Chens exchanged glances, identical smirks curling at their lips. Then we'll have to trouble you to find out for yourself. Boom. The moment his voice fell, 3 Mu Chen figures shot out simultaneously, transforming into 3 beams of light that directly charged toward the Spirit Warrior. Seeing the 3 of them coming, the Spirit Warrior's expression tightened. He didn't dare slack off for even a moment. With a single palm strike, his spiritual energy surged like a storm in his hand, condensing into a dragon-shaped spiritual force that let out a roar as it swept toward the 3 beams of light. Boom. The black and white Mu Chen moved quickly and struck at the same time. Crystal-like spiritual energy surged outward, crashing directly into the dragon-shaped spiritual force. Bang. As the 2 forces collided, the crystal-like spiritual energy emitted a brilliant glow. With just one punch, it shattered the dragon-shaped spiritual force into pieces. What? Seeing his attack shattered in an instant, the Spirit Warrior was shocked. He knew that although Mu Chen had many tricks, he was still just a lower Earth Supreme. Previously, when he clashed with Mu Chen's spiritual energy, the result had been clearly in his favor. But now, when they clashed again, he was instantly on the defensive. Damn it. How could this be possible? Even though the black and white Mu Chen both possessed the strength of a lower Earth Supreme, there's no way they could work together to easily withstand my spiritual attack. The Spirit Warrior was a peak upper Earth Supreme. not to mention 2 lower Earth Supremes. Even if several more were added, it would be difficult to match him. Yet now, just 2 lower Earth Supremes, Chen, had made him suffer a considerable loss. Now's not the time to be distracted. As the spirit warrior became momentarily distracted, a faint laugh suddenly came from behind him. Chen's main body, not knowing when he had appeared behind him, struck out calmly with a punch. Body sacrifice demon fist. With the punch, spiritual energy erupted, and a death-defying, self-sacrificing aura roared outward, sending a tingling sensation through the spirit warrior's scalp. However, he didn't panic. With a swift motion, he slapped his palm out. His spiritual energy surged, astounding in power. While his previous attack had been destroyed by the black and white Chen, the main body of Chen was now alone. Boom. The punch and palm collided, and violent spiritual energy raged outward. But in that moment of contact, the spirit warrior's expression suddenly changed. He realized that Chen had become stronger than before. The spiritual shockwave exploded. Chen staggered back several steps, but the spirit warrior was much worse off, retreating dozens of steps, each step leaving a deep, bottomless footprint in the ground. How did your spiritual energy become so much stronger? The spirit warrior stared in shock at Chen's main body. The strength of Chen's spiritual energy in that last strike was nearly several times stronger than before. Chen smiled slightly. After the appearance of the black and white Chen, their spiritual energy had become interconnected. Therefore, no matter who made the move, they would each possess the combined strength of all three. Additionally, the perfect coordination between the main body and its clones led to an astonishing increase in power. Even if Chen were to face the spirit warrior in a pure battle of spiritual energy alone, he would no longer be at any disadvantage. Boom. However, Chen didn't need to explain all this to the spirit warrior. With a thought, the 3 Chens charged forward like fierce tigers, their overwhelming spiritual energy transforming into waves of relentless and unmatched attacks, continuously enveloping the spirit warrior. Faced with the combined onslaught of the 3 Chens, the spirit warrior pushed himself to the limit but continued to retreat, looking more and more disheveled. He had completely fallen into a losing position. Bang! Another hard clash of spiritual energy. The spirit warrior was sent flying, his form in disarray. His face changed, and then a roar suddenly resounded throughout the area. Spirit Sword Son, Spirit Dragon Son, come help me. At this point, he no longer cared about his dignity. He could only hope to summon the Spirit Sword Son and Spirit Dragon Son, so that the 3 of them could combine forces to resist Chen's unstoppable onslaught. In the distance, the Spirit Sword Son and Spirit Dragon Son, hearing the spirit warriors shout, exchanged glances. Their expressions changed slightly, and then, gritting their teeth, they were about to rush to his aid. They knew that if the spirit warrior were to fall, with Chen's overwhelming strength, they likely wouldn't be able to stop him either. However, just as they moved, Sumu and Chumin blocked their path. You want to help? Did you ask us first? Sumu and Chumin couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They had been mocked by the Spirit Sword Son and Spirit Dragon Son before, and now, seeing them in such a helpless state, they couldn't help but feel a little vindicated. The Spirit Sword Son and the Spirit Dragon Son remained silent, directly unleashing their ferocious and sharp offensive. At this moment, they held nothing back. A variety of techniques erupted, and in an instant, they suppressed Sumu and Chumin. The latter 2, however, were resilient, gritting their teeth and withstanding the pressure. Even if it meant getting injured, they fought back and entangled the 2 opponents. On their side, chaos unfolded, and the spirit warrior became increasingly precarious. Boom! A spiritual energy storm raged, and the spirit warrior's hair flew wildly. A trace of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth. He gazed at the 3 Chens approaching slowly, his eyes turning bloodshot, as if he were a beast cornered and enraged. Chen, even if I fall to you today, I won't let you have an easy time. The spirit warrior growled, his eyes filled with viciousness. The next moment, he bit the tip of his tongue, spitting out a mouthful of essence blood. The blood ignited, turning into red flames that engulfed his body. Roar! The flames seemed to directly ignite the blood within the spirit warrior, causing both his body and soul to burn. At the same time, a violent spiritual energy, as fierce as towering smoke, surged into the sky from his body. Burning essence blood? Chen's gaze flickered upon seeing this. The spirit warrior was indeed a ruthless character, not only ruthless to his enemies but also to himself. Realizing the situation was critical, he had no hesitation in burning his own essence blood. However, doing so would mean that after the battle, he would need extensive recovery time and might even suffer permanent repercussions, potentially hindering his future strength. Chen, let's leave the battlefield together. At that time, the only spot will still belong to our Western battle hall. The spirit warrior laughed maniacally, having decided to risk his life. He planned to drag Chen off the battlefield. With the strength of the Spirit Sword Sun and the Spirit Dragon Sun, defeating Su Mu and Chu Min would not be difficult. Boom. Immense spiritual energy howled around the spirit warrior like swirling tornadoes. At this moment, he resembled a demonic god, his cold eyes locked onto Chen. In the next instant, his hands rapidly formed a seal, and he punched out. Great divine ability, Battle Emperor Spirit Fist. As the punch was thrown, the world darkened. At this moment, even the surrounding strong figures on the White Jade Plaza suddenly changed their expressions. This punch from the spirit warrior was almost his strongest move without activating his supreme Dharma form. Clearly, at this critical juncture, the spirit warrior had been pushed to his limit. However, as the surrounding experts changed expressions, Chen, standing in front of the spirit warrior, merely laughed. Then, a clear whistle echoed across the heavens. He took a step forward, and black and white Chen followed closely behind him. The seemingly casual steps, however, immediately formed a mysterious formation. Chen stepped forward, as if the spirit warrior's world-shattering punch meant nothing to him. His soft whisper was barely audible amidst the howling winds. Since it's come to this, I'll use you to initiate the first battle of my three spirits battle formation. Boom. The spirit warrior's punch was unleashed, and immense spiritual energy gathered like a storm, eventually forming a gigantic fist imprint, radiating a powerful aura that caused the very heavens and earth to tremble beneath its might. As the punch struck, the spirit warrior's face instantly turned pale, but a trace of pride appeared in his eyes. This punch was the pinnacle of his strength. Even a peak Upper Earth Supreme would have to retreat before such a strike. After this punch, even if I can no longer fight, I will have succeeded in dragging Chen off the battlefield. The only spot will still belong to our Western battle hall. The losses I've suffered will be compensated by the Palace Master in other ways. The spirit warrior's eyes glinted as he thought. He knew that with Chen's current combat power, victory was impossible, so he had to use this final life-or-death technique to drag Chen off the battlefield. If he succeeded, he would have eliminated a powerful foe for the Spirit Sword Sun and the Spirit Dragon Sun. Once he succeeded, not only would the Western Battle Emperor not blame him, but he would also reward him. With his thoughts in motion, the spirit warrior cast a cold and vicious glance at Chen ahead, only to see that the latter showed no sign of dodging. Immediately, a mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "You arrogant fool, do you really think you have already won?" However, at the mocking gaze directed at him, Chen chose to ignore it. At that moment, as the three spirits battle formation was completed, the bodies of the black and white Chen behind him suddenly trembled. The next moment, an overwhelming battle intent erupted from both their bodies, rising into the sky and transforming into a vast ocean of battle intent, howling through the air. The power of that battle intent ocean was even stronger than the combined strength of the soul-slaughtering guards and the demon-subduing guards. To think that the battle intent of just two people could surpass two elite armies. The three spirits battle formation truly is mysterious and unmatched, Chen thought, his eyes gleaming with excitement as he couldn't help but feel joy at the formation's power, which surpassed even his expectations. Feeling elated, Chen threw his head back and laughed aloud. He then gazed at the massive fist mark descending upon him, and with a swift motion, he formed a seal with one hand. Whoosh, whoosh. As the seal was completed, the ocean of battle intent surged, and in the next instant, an enormous hand emerged from the ocean. The hand, which was larger than the fist imprint from Spirit Warrior, covered the sky and blocked the sun. What was even more shocking was that the hand was covered in countless battle runes. Is that the battle spirit? Spirit Warrior's pupils contracted as he voiced his disbelief. At this moment, Chen hadn't even summoned his two armies, yet such a powerful battle intent was emanating from them. Where did it come from? His horrified gaze shifted to the black and white Chen behind him. It was only then that he sensed the vast battle intent emanating from their bodies. How is that possible? How can he control the battle intent of a lower Earth Supreme? Spirit Warrior's face turned pale in shock. It was widely known that the stronger a person's power, the more their battle intent was infused with their personal will, making it harder to control. To control the battle intent of a lower Earth Supreme required at least a battle formation grandmaster with tens of millions of battle runes. Yet Chen was still far from reaching that level. If not for this, even the Western Battle Emperor would be cautious in his presence. Boom. However, Chen didn't bother explaining. With a thought, the giant hand, adorned with countless battle runes, shot forward with a roar. In the blink of an eye, it grabbed the fierce, towering fist imprint of Spirit Warrior, crushing it into its palm. The two forces collided, but the battle rune-covered hand remained unmoving, gradually tightening its grip. The fist imprint rapidly cracked, and with a resounding explosion, it shattered into pieces. Spirit Warrior's face turned pale in an instant, and his eyes filled with despair. He had never expected that his deadly attack, made at such a high cost, would be so easily neutralized by Chen. The terrifying spiritual shockwave raged through the air, but Chen didn't even blink. He flicked his sleeve, and the now dimmed battle rune hand once again descended, mercilessly slamming towards Spirit Warrior. Before the hand even landed, the ground beneath them began to collapse. The terrifying energy wave descended, and Spirit Warrior snapped back to his senses, his body freezing with cold fear. He realized that Chen had no intention of holding back. If he took that palm, even he would be doomed. The shadow of death loomed over him, and Spirit Warrior's eyes filled with fear. Boom. Just as the battle rune hand was about to strike, the space around Spirit Warrior suddenly shattered, opening up a space crack that swallowed him whole. As Spirit Warrior was pulled into the rift, a number of battle runes flew out, followed by a faint, subtle fluctuation. The moment that wave spread, the descending battle rune hand quivered violently before exploding into a shower of light particles. Chen watched this, his expression subtly shifting. He gave a faint smile. The only one capable of making such a move to save someone, with just a subtle fluctuation to break his attack, could only be the Western Battle Emperor. Clearly, the Western Battle Emperor didn't want to see his direct disciple perish at Chen's hands. On the white jade plaza, atop the towering stone steps, the Western Battle Emperor's face darkened. The space before him shattered, and Spirit Warrior's disheveled figure tumbled out. Upon witnessing this scene, countless powerful figures across the land erupted in astonishment. It was now clear to them, just moments ago, it was the Western Battle Emperor who had intervened to rescue Spirit Warrior. Useless fool. The Western Battle Emperor glared angrily at Spirit Warrior. Who would have thought that the disciple he had placed such high hopes on would end up in such a miserable state, forcing him to personally intervene? Spirit Warrior was deathly pale, his expression filled with utter despair. The Western Battle Emperor paid him no further attention. Instead, his gaze turned toward Chen, who stood within the light screen. As he looked at the three identical figures, a glimmer of intrigue flashed through his eyes. He spoke slowly. It is said that in the ancient era, the Heavenly Emperor possessed a peerless divine ability known as One Chi transforms three purities. However, this supreme ability was lost for tens of thousands of years. Who would have thought it would eventually fall into his hands? What a remarkable fortune. Being a Heavenly Supreme, the Western Battle Emperor had seen countless wonders. After a brief period of contemplation, he discerned the nature of Chen's two avatars. Even as he spoke, a hint of heat crept into his voice. A divine ability of this caliber was an immense temptation, even for a Heavenly Supreme like him. The Battle Emperor has sharp eyes. Chen has indeed inherited the Heavenly Emperor's legacy, the Flame Emperor said with a faint smile. That day, the martial ancestor and I were both present, and we even received the Heavenly Emperor's request to look after him. Hearing these words, the Western Battle Emperor's heart tensed. He was no fool. He could clearly hear the Flame Emperor's warning. Do not covet Chen's One Chi transforms three purities, or he would have to contend with both the Flame Emperor and the Martial Ancestor. In today's Great Thousand Worlds, if the Flame Emperor and the Martial Ancestor joined forces, even the most ancient and powerful Gu clans would struggle to stand against them. Thus, the fervor in the Western Battle Emperor's eyes gradually faded. No matter how valuable a peerless divine ability was, it was not worth provoking these two powerhouses, especially when even the Western Heaven Battle Hall lacked the strength to challenge the boundless fire domain. As the Flame Emperor and the Western Battle Emperor conversed, The atmosphere around White Jade Plaza was in an uproar. Many formidable figures sighed repeatedly, clearly caught off guard by this unexpected outcome. Among them, Luo Heavenly God was particularly emotional. His old face flushed red with excitement, though traces of disbelief still lingered in his eyes. Even he had never imagined that Spirit Warrior would ultimately fall at Mu Chen's hands. He's only a lower Earth Supreme right now. If he advances to upper Earth Supreme, I fear that beneath perfect Earth Supreme, no one will be his match. Luo Heavenly God's face glowed with pride, though his expression soon turned complicated as he gazed at Mu Chen through the light screen. Back when he first met the boy a few years ago, could he ever have imagined that this once weak youth would reach such heights in such a short time? Luo Li's judgment is far better than this old fool's, he sighed. This wasn't the first time he had uttered such words. While the outside world was in an uproar over Spirit Warrior's defeat, Mu Chen withdrew his battle will, dispersing the three spirits' battle formation. Then, his gaze turned coldly toward the other two battlefields. There, Spirit Sword Sun and Spirit Dragon were still locked in fierce combat, completely overwhelming Su Mu and Chu Min. However, the moment they felt Mu Chen's gaze land on them, their hearts trembled. Without hesitation, they immediately retreated, their eyes filled with wariness and dread. Mu Chen's three identical figures flickered, appearing midair. He locked eyes with Spirit Sword Sun and Spirit Dragon, his voice ice cold. Do you still want to fight? Under the chilling gaze of three Mu Chens, Spirit Sword Sun and Spirit Dragon felt a cold sweat run down their backs. After witnessing Spirit Warrior's crushing defeat, their fear of Mu Chen had reached its peak. They knew that from the moment Spirit Warrior fell, their fates had been sealed. TCH, consider yourselves lucky. They cast unwilling glances at Su Mu and Chu Min. If not for Mu Chen, given just a little more time, victory would have been theirs. Exchanging a look, they gritted their teeth, flicked their sleeves, and tossed out all their battle seals before slowly retreating from the battlefield. Facing Mu Chen's overwhelming dominance, they had completely lost their will to fight. Watching them withdraw, Su Mu and Chu Min finally breathed sighs of relief, as if a great weight had been lifted. They then turned to Mu Chen, their gazes filled with complex emotions. Who would have thought that this last-minute ally would be so ferocious, capable of single-handedly crushing Spirit Warrior? Brother Mu, you are indeed no ordinary person. This opportunity, the only spot available, we are lucky to be able to share in it. I'm afraid only you, Brother Mu, truly deserve to receive it, said Su Mu and Chu Min, both of whom understood the situation. There was only one spot, and naturally Mu Chen wouldn't give it to them. So, they graciously gave it up, seeing this as an opportunity to deepen their relationship with him. Hearing their words, Mu Chen also smiled warmly, and with a polite smile, he said, "If not for your help, today's outcome would have been uncertain." As he spoke, he flicked his fingers, and the battle seals thrown by the Spirit Sword Sun and Spirit Dragon Sun flew toward them. These battle seals, you can use them to exchange for some treasures. It's worth your while. Since they had the insight to understand his gesture, Mu Chen naturally wanted to reciprocate, offering them some benefits in return. Seeing the battle seals flying towards them, Su Mu and Chu Min both smiled with joy. With these battle seals, they could indeed exchange for some treasures they had long coveted. Then we thank Brother Mu for your generosity. Not holding back, they took the battle seals and quickly exchanged all of them for treasures from the Battle Emperor's treasure vault. Once they had exchanged all the battle seals, their bodies began to gradually dissipate, clearly indicating they were being sent out of the battlefield. As they left, both of them cupped their fists toward Mu Chen and smiled, saying, "We congratulate Brother Mu here and now for becoming the Continental Heir." With their words, their figures completely vanished. With their departure, Mu Chen let out a sigh of relief. He then noticed the battlefield space starting to distort, signaling the end of the competition. He raised his head, smiled slightly, and murmured to himself, "The Continental Heir, huh? I'm actually looking forward to it." When the battlefield space twisted to its extreme, Mu Chen felt a wave of spatial fluctuation. As his eyes brightened, he was greeted with an overwhelming cheer, as if a mountain of sound was crashing toward him from all directions. Mu Chen looked around and realized that he was once again standing in the White Jade Plaza. Around him, countless gazes of awe and admiration were converging upon him. When Mu Chen first entered the battlefield, few people paid attention to him. At that time, everyone's focus was on the three holy sons, Lu Xingchen, Su Mu, and Chu Min, who were already legendary figures from the Western Heaven continent. Although Chen had some fame, many people thought that a lower Earth Supreme daring to enter the upper Earth Supreme battlefield to compete for resources would only end in one way: being chased out like a stray dog. Thus, when Chen entered the upper Earth Supreme battlefield, many people watched with amusement, thinking it was just a joke. However, no one had expected this young man, who was hardly noticed, to leave them in shock and disbelief over the next period of time. Even the powerful spirit warrior was defeated by him, making him the most dazzling figure in the upper Earth Supreme battlefield. At this moment, seeing this tall and handsome young man, even some top-tier strongmen felt a sense of unease. They knew that such a person would undoubtedly have an extraordinary future. It was even possible that, one day, this young man could challenge the heavenly supreme realm. A prodigy like him was not someone you wanted to offend. Some of the super strong individuals who had participated in the upper Earth Supreme battlefield, but were defeated by Chen and lost their battle seals, at this moment, were putting aside their previous dissatisfaction and hostility toward him. Such a person was not one to be made an enemy of. As Chen felt the countless gazes of reverence upon him, he remained calm, only raising his head to look at the stone staircase leading up to the Heavenly Emperor. There, two major figures were casting their gazes upon him. The Western Battle Emperor's gaze was still one of disdain, his eyes indifferent. Though Chen had performed astonishingly on the battlefield, even claiming the only spot in the upper Earth Supreme battlefield, such a feat was still not enough to move the Western Battle Emperor. In this vast world, there were countless prodigies, but only a few could ever reach the Heavenly Supreme level. And as long as one was not a Heavenly Supreme, even if they were a peak Earth Supreme, they still didn't merit much attention from someone of the Western Battle Emperor's status. However, Chen completely ignored the indifferent gaze of the Western Battle Emperor. He understood that not all peak powerhouses possessed the broad vision and magnanimity of the Flame Emperor or the Martial Ancestor. Moreover, at his current strength, he wasn't yet qualified to command the attention of a Heavenly Supreme. Since that was the case, there was no need to force the issue. Chen believed that one day, he would surpass the Western Battle Emperor. But to reach that step, he still needed time. Ignoring the Western Battle Emperor's gaze, Chen instead saw the Flame Emperor smiling at him with evident approval. After all, it was the Flame Emperor who had recommended Chen to compete for a spot as a Continental heir in the Western Heaven continent. Though he hadn't been entirely certain of Chen's success at the start, the final result proved that his judgment had been sound. Chen deeply respected the Flame Emperor, so he clasped his fists and bowed slightly. It was sheer luck that I made it to the end. Fortunately, I did not bring shame upon you, Senior Flame Emperor. The Flame Emperor chuckled. Then you should thank the Battle Emperor for his generosity. After all, you claimed a Continental heir title from the Western Heaven continent. Chen smiled and nodded before turning toward the Western Battle Emperor, cupping his fists. Many thanks for your generosity, Battle Emperor. The Western Battle Emperor's mouth twitched involuntarily. The thought of how one of the three precious Continental heir slots from the Western Heaven continent had fallen into Chen's hands made his heart ache. After all, a Continental heir was a priceless title, often seen as a ticket to the Heavenly Supreme realm. While not every Continental heir would ascend to that level, they had a significantly higher chance compared to others. Furthermore, the baptism power of a Continental heir was formed from the condensation of the Western Heaven continent's heaven and earth spiritual energy over hundreds of years. He had originally intended to bestow it upon a loyal subordinate. If one of them ascended to the Heavenly Supreme realm in the future, it would greatly enhance the strength of the Western Heaven battle hall. But now, Chen had suddenly appeared and taken a share of the spoils. How could the Western Battle Emperor possibly be pleased? Yet, no matter how displeased he was, he had no choice but to swallow his frustration in the presence of the Flame Emperor. If he had known this would happen, he would never have accepted the Dragon Phoenix Heavenly Supreme pill from the Flame Emperor. That pill, while valuable, paled in comparison to the worth of a Continental heir title. Thus, in response to Chen's words, the Western Battle Emperor merely nodded expressionlessly and said, "Since you earned this title through your own strength, I have nothing more to say. Wait here. Once the battles conclude, you will all undergo the baptism." Chen was well aware of the resentment in the Western Battle Emperor's heart, but he paid it no mind. Smiling slightly, he withdrew from White Jade Plaza and approached Luo Heavenly God. Luo Heavenly God looked at him with a peculiar gaze. After a long moment, he patted Mu Chen's shoulder and chuckled with pride. Well done. That little girl Luo Li is quite the eye for talent. Mu Chen smiled but cast him a meaningful glance. Back when he was at the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, Luo Heavenly God hadn't been so approving. Seeing Mu Chen's expression, Luo Heavenly God coughed awkwardly before regaining his composure. By eliminating Blood Spirit's son, you've done a great service to our Luo God clan. Luo Li will be very grateful to you. His expression grew heavy toward the end of his sentence. After all, it was Blood Spirit's son who had gravely injured Luo Li's father all those years ago, ultimately leading to his death. Mu Chen replied softly, "There's no need to say such things among family. The Luo God clan will only continue to grow stronger from here." Luo Heavenly God suppressed his emotions and nodded firmly. Now that Luo Li had taken full control of the clan and inherited the Luoshan inheritance, it was only a matter of time before the Luo God clan once again had a Luoshan. When that day arrived, the clan might reclaim its former glory. Mu Chen changed the subject. Have the other two battles reached a conclusion? The Great Perfection Earth Supreme battlefield has long been decided. The final victor is someone you're quite familiar with, Elder Winter of the Western Heaven Battle Hall. Luo Heavenly God replied. Him. Mu Chen was momentarily stunned before clicking his tongue. If he and Luo Li hadn't participated, wouldn't all 3 Continental air slots have fallen into the hands of the Western Heaven Battle Hall? What about the Lower Earth Supreme battlefield? Mu Chen asked again. The outcome has not been decided yet. After all, that battlefield has the most people. However, the intensity in the Lower Earth Supreme battlefield is no less than what you have there. When talking about the Lower Earth Supreme battlefield, Luo Heavenly God's eyes were filled with a smile. How so? Mu Chen asked, a bit curious. Unlike the chaotic battle you have there, the current Lower Earth Supreme battlefield has 2 very large factions. Each side is over 100 people. Luo Heavenly God said with a smile. 2 factions? Mu Chen was stunned. In the Lower Earth Supreme battlefield, there can only be one final victor. How could there be 2 factions? How will the distribution work? One faction is led by Ling Fizi from the Western Heaven Battle Hall. Shortly after entering the battlefield, she used the Western Heaven Battle Hall's name to gather a lot of powerful warriors. She began sweeping through and seized many battle seals from those who had yet to join any faction. Later on, many other powerful warriors were angered by Ling Fizi's actions and secretly began to form alliances, but many of those alliances were defeated by Ling Fizi. At this point, Luo Li also started recruiting some powerful warriors, gradually gaining momentum. After absorbing some other warriors who were dissatisfied with Ling Fizi, she eventually became a faction as strong as Ling Fizi's. Mu Chen's eyes flickered, then he smiled and said, Ling Fizi's actions are likely aimed at dealing with Luo Li. Luo Li must have sensed this, so she responded by using the same method to fight back. Ling Fizi had clearly had a strong prejudice against Luo Li earlier, so she definitely did not want to see Luo Li shine in the Lower Earth Supreme battlefield. That's why she used various methods to try and eliminate her. She probably didn't have absolute confidence in defeating Luo Li, so she resorted to gathering a group of powerful warriors to target Luo Li. However, Luo Li was clearly no pushover. After realizing Ling Fizi's intentions, she also took countermeasures. Although Ling Fizi had gathered many powerful warriors with the Western Heaven Battle Hall's reputation, she clearly underestimated Luo Li's abilities. Luo Li lay low at the beginning, allowing Ling Fizi to sweep around and provoke discontent. When the time was right, she began to form her faction, which led to much greater success. People are saying that this time, the Lower Earth Supreme battlefield has basically become a showdown between 2 women, Luo Heavenly God said, chuckling. Originally, it was supposed to be a great chaotic battle, but Ling Fizi and Luo Li turned it into a faction war, which is quite comical. However, looking at the situation before us, the final battle in the Lower Earth Supreme battlefield should be approaching. After all, apart from the 2 factions, there are practically no other participants left. Mu Chen slightly nodded, about to speak, when his expression suddenly changed. He looked up and saw a huge light screen suddenly appear above the White Jade Plaza. In the light screen, the Lower Earth Supreme battlefield appeared. At that moment, on the battlefield, 2 groups of people transformed into beams of light, rushing in from all directions and finally stood firmly above the towering mountain range, clearly divided. Mu Chen scanned the scene and immediately saw a familiar and graceful figure at the front of one of the groups. He couldn't help but smile. This really was a battlefield for 2 women,